So before we start, or as we're starting, maybe we should pause for just a second to think about what Ken would want to say. You know that? And I think that he'd say, had an incredible family, a wife who was dedicated to me in the good times and in times when I didn't even deserve it. You know? And the bottom line is, I had a fantastic life. And he would describe it, I think, as one hell of a ride. You know, I love this idea that came out in a recent song. You're not talking about Rick Mine or Chic, are you?
No.
Oh. I got to be careful, but I don't want to do anything to take away from the senior rabbi. But there's a song that came out in Israel saying that all life is a human tapestry, and that when someone dies, part of us die. But there's also a part of us that has that person within us all of the time. All the time. Part we lose, but part remains. The first Psalm talks about that there is, I'm going to read in just a second, a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in season, whose foliage never fades, and whose fruit always flourishes. This is Psalm number 1, and that's Kenny. He's that tree planted by the streams of water that always yields its fruit and whose foliage never fades. So the psalm reads in part, "Happy are those who've not followed the counsel of the wicked, or taken the path of the sinners, or joined the company of the insolent. Rather, the teaching of God is their delight, and they study that teaching day and night. They are like a tree planted beside streams of water that yields its fruit in season, whose foliage never fades, and whose fruit always flourishes." The poet laureate of Israel, Chaim Nachman Bialik, once wrote, "After my death mourn me thus, there was a man and he is no more. His life is ended, his song has been broken. He had one more melody, but that's lost forever." You know, I think that I disagree with Bialik on this, because I think that Kenny's melody, which if I were to give it a title, would be called the Mensch Melody, stays on forever. So I'm going to read for the 23rd Psalm, and then after that, if you'd like to join me, please do so. Adonai ro'i v'lo eksar ben odeshi yarbitseni al me menuchot yenahaleni. Nafshi yeshovev yancheni b'magalei tzedek l'ma'an shemo. Gam ki elech b'geitz al mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha mishantecha hema yenachamuni. Taroch lefanai shogan neged torai deshanti b'shemen roshi kosi reveya. Achtov v'chesed yirfuni kol yemei chayai v'shavti b'beit Adonai le'orech hami. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in straight paths for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I shall fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou hast anointed my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever.
So, I think we all know that there are doors that open slowly and yet they close quickly. Doors that open slowly and close quickly. And that's what our tradition says happens between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, the holiest day of the year, what we call the 10 days of awe. Doors that open slowly and close quickly. We were not able to close all of the doors here even after Yom Kippur is open, but I want to go somewhere else with this. On Erev Rosh Hashanah, just as our New Year's beginning, the heavenly doors, the gates of righteousness, what we call Sha'arei Tzedek, they open to our prayers. And slowly, as each day goes by, they open a little bit wider throughout those 10 days. And at the end of Yom Kippur, during what we call the Ne'ilah service, those gates close. And their quick closing adds urgency to our prayers for forgiveness. But if we go back 24 hours or so to those hours right before Yom Kippur, we might imagine that the gates are at their widest. And it was at that moment, when the gates of righteousness were at their widest, that Ken Eisenberg took his final breaths. And having just said this, you know that you were trying out all sorts of jokes in your head about this. Aren't you? There's something like, man, those gates needed to be extra wide, otherwise there was no way Ken was getting in. Are you sure those were the gates of righteousness and not, the gate? Kenny would have expected no less of us. I mean, he would have wanted us making those jokes. He had a way of bringing out the lighter side in nearly everyone. But all joking aside, and it was down near impossible to ever keep jokes aside when I was with Kenny, it makes total sense that God would want those gates, those heavenly gates of righteousness, Sha'arei Tzedek, to be wide, wide open when it was Ken's time. God would do so as a tribute to Ken for his commitment to tzedek, to righteousness. What I would call tzedek with a smile. That was Ken. We who knew him will remember him as a man who modeled dedication, service, and seriousness. And yet at the same time, I hope that you, like me, will remember him because of the smiles, the laughs, mostly at his expense, and his playfulness. We'll remember him as a great man, because that's what he was. Just 12 days ago, almost to the minute, as we were starting the Torah service on Rosh Hashanah morning, Temple Emmanuel dedicated our book of the new year to Ina and Ken. I stood right here as I talked about y'all. And I'm so glad that we did this. The timing could not have been more perfect. We know, maybe you heard, that Ken wanted to live until Yom Kippur, and you know something, he did. Got right up to the line there. There were days when I wasn't sure he was going to make it even till Rosh Hashanah. Forget about that. I wasn't sure he was going to make it past Thursday, way back when. And then there were other times that we were convinced that he had, forget about 9 lives, he had more than 9 lives. And those gates were just opening on Rosh Hashanah. And Ken at home was able to feel the gratitude of a temple that he loved and that loved him back so much. The tributes and wishes that people put in the book of the New Year. Pretty amazing. What a gift for him to have known how much he meant to others in the days before he would pass on. And to be honored this way together with his sweetheart Ina, the two of them, the epitome of the best of Southern jewelry. That's why we chose you guys. Actually, it was pretty obvious to us. And that book, the Book of the New Year, is a treasure. It's a chronicle of your goodness and will be a lasting legacy for the generations to come. To Ken's credit, he always went up and above when it came to organizational involvement. Not long ago, he told Lee, his daughter, that the following positions he held in activities should be mentioned today. So I'm going to read this list in no particular order. Ken was president of MAC, the Men's Apparel Club, president of Old Dominion Fashion Exhibitors, and president of Carolina, Virginia Fashion Exhibitors. He was proud that for those positions, his fellow sales reps voted him into those posts. He was the chair of North Carolina Hillel. He was the president of the NRHS, the National Railway Historic Society, or as the family sometimes calls it, the Hysterical Society. He was a Temple Emmanuel Board of Trustees member, serving terms at two different times in his life. I liked it so much the first time that he accepted when we asked him back a second time. He was vice chair of the first young leadership group ever at the Greensboro Jewish Federation. He was president of Temple Emmanuel Brotherhood. Thank you so much for the Brotherhood members who are here today. He was a high holiday usher. And he was a member of Temple's Hevra Kadisha, our burial society. At Staunton Military Academy, he was a cheerleader. Imagine that. He was the honor drill team member, he was manager of the swim team, and he led Jewish services every Shabbat. In fact, he was truly proud that he conducted those services at Staunton Military Academy every week. Did that as a high school student. At UNC, Ken managed the swim team and was a member of the ZBT fraternity. I will add this to that list that Ken wanted. He participated in mitzvah days since its inception. And moreover, together with Dave Delman, Ken could often be cited in waiters cleaning out Temple's fountain. I think that's one of the reasons that we kept the windows open over here, so you could look out and see Lake Emmanuel over there, where often you could find Ken wearing one of those fishing hats with waiters on. Ken was never shy to tell the world that he was from Reidsville. That's how he would introduce himself at Hevra Torah each Shabbat morning. He was a mainstay of our Torah study group. Born in March of 1940, as Adar, the happiest month on the Hebrew calendar, was beginning. He's the oldest of Sam and Esther Eisenberg's two sons, younger brother Barry. Ken and Barry attended religious school and were confirmed at Temple Emmanuel. Their parents wanted to make sure that they were exposed to as many Jewish experiences as possible. One quick story. Barry remembers times that he, as the kid brother, would go into Sunday school while Ken would get Mel Kriegsman and Kenny Miller, and they would get in the car and, let's just say, go elsewhere. It was during those years that Ken would develop his lifelong friendships with Mel and Kenny. Barry remembers growing up sharing a room with his big brother, chatting about big brother things and sharing interests such as their fondness for train sets and real trains. Ken Eisenberg would spend summers at Camp Blue Star in Hendersonville. He joined any Jewish organization he could, including BBYO, AZA. Ken was the first Jewish kid to go through the Reidsville school system and later attended high school, as I said before, at the Staunton Military Academy in Virginia. Kids sometimes get sent to military academies in order to learn discipline. You might think that that was the case with Ken, but that's not true. He just wanted more from school than Reidsville could provide at the time. And so he asked and then received permission to attend that military academy. Barry, you truly looked up to your brother. You'll never forget the spring of '57, I don't think many people will, when UNC won the NCAA championship game against Wilt Chamberlain and the Kansas Jayhawks in what? A triple overtime thriller. How could you forget that? Because the two of you were on a train in New York with your parents, and that small transistor radio that you had with you had terrible reception while the train was moving. And so at every train stop, you and your brother would jump off and get a game update. It must have been amazing. Not long after that, Ken would attend UNC. He loved Chapel Hill. Even though he would leave school early in order to begin working, he loved returning to campus. He loved being a supporter of Jewish students throughout the decades, especially serving the Hillel there and in central North Carolina. I saw this firsthand over 3 decades ago. That's when, as North Carolina Hillel director and rabbi, that's when I first met Ken. I met him back in 1993. He wore his Tar Heel gear nearly everywhere, that man did, and he did it with such pride. Even as his health was waning, especially as his health was waning, he would have on his trusty Carolina sweatshirt. And I gotta tell you, most of the time when I was over at the house, a Carolina game was on. I'd be like, wait, they're not playing them. They're like, no, that's just a rerun, some classic Carolina game or something like that. So proud. It was while he was a student at UNC that he would first set eyes on a young co-ed from Memphis. Ina had been at women's college here in Greensboro, And on one occasion, Min Klein from Temple spoke to the 50 Jewish young women at that meeting and urged y'all to take a bus to Chapel Hill for whatever, some special weekend gathering that was taking place there, who remembers. And the key thing is that Ina followed Min Klein's advice. Ken would see her getting off of that bus, and if you don't believe in love at first sight, go ahead and close your ears right now. No one's closing their ears. Because seeing her, Ken said, that one's for me. And he made good on that. The two of you would marry in the summer of '63, living for a while in Little Rock, and then coming here in Greensboro. Along the way, you would become parents, Jay first, then Lee. If you ever saw Ken with his son Jay and or daughter Lee, you would know why they consider him to be such a great dad. He was also a very proud grandfather. His license plate, Poppy, said it all. And I will never forget being at Rachel and James's wedding. And this took place after Ken's fall and his brain injury. And everyone was dancing, and the two of us were sitting there on the sidelines together just watching, and he was kvelling. And he couldn't say enough about what a blessing it was to be alive and to share such a happy occasion, such a simcha with family, with friends, especially with his grandkids. And that wasn't an isolated moment of gratitude and pride. That was vintage, everyday Ken. What a mensch. There are a zillion and one more stories. Here are two of them. Ina once went to Reedsville for Passover. Arriving before Ken got there, he was on his way. This was well before cell phones. And he was running late, like really late. And his mom was starting to get like really upset. And so when he arrived, and she let him have it. And the fact is that he had this white shirt on, but it was all dirty. And mom just laid into him. What do you mean showing up late, looking like that? I made that line up, by the way. But that was probably that was probably accurate. And I said it a little milder, okay? But she really let him have it. And Ken then explained that on the way he saw a lady on the side of the road who needed her tire changed. And then he said, if it was you or Ina, I would never, ever leave you there alone. And so I stopped to help. And now you know why those heavenly gates needed to be so wide when it was Ken's time. Second story. Ina once read an article that there are certain things that you should have in your car for the winter, just in case. And she read out the long, detailed list to Ken, like water and sand and all sorts of other stuff, just in case. Ken listened and then declared that he had everything he needed in his car. He said he had a bag of Snickers, all he needed. He said, and they taste great when they're frozen. To which Ina just shook her head and said, I give up. Again, tzedek with a smile. Ina, we all know that you never gave up. For 61 years, you were his devoted bride. Chances are he would have gone years ago were it not for you. We're not for you, we're not for Jay, we're not for Lee, we're not for the family. Your TLC, the team you put together, kept him going. Kept him going for these past 6 years. December 12th, 2018. That day was a game changer. Ken fell in that icy parking lot. He suffered a traumatic brain injury. We know that he really only went to work that day against everyone's pleas that he stay at home because he was just so darn determined and stubborn. He would do anything to help. He would do anything to live up to what he saw as his responsibilities. When the gates are open, it's not just for the righteous to enter. It also allows angels, those extra special people in our lives, to carry out their heavenly calling among us. And those who cared for Ken, seeing to his healing, rehabilitation, and strength for many months and years, they were those angels, together with family. The connection that he forged with Ola, with other caretakers, especially with his physical occupational therapist, John Davidson, who was like an adopted son to him. Those were true lifelines. Even last week, when he was talking to John about how he was ready to get up and walk again, to once again make it down the steps. And that was just Ken, who never gave up. And neither did the Bayada caretakers, Team Ken, Dr. Pat O'Brien at Wake Med Rehab Center in Raleigh. All of y'all were angels, as was the Hospice of Piedmont. Those gates open, not just so we can go in, but so those who help could come and be among us. Ken was especially grateful to those outside of the family. I know you all are, but he was beyond grateful to his loved ones. He told me so, especially you, Ina. Ina, you wanted me to pass on a message this morning. By the way, I love that you are always looking to share a teaching with others. You did that on Rosh Hashanah morning, telling everybody they got to get out and they got to volunteer. We were honoring you when you're teaching what other people should do. And today we're remembering Ken, and so you said, I want to make sure that you say this. Even in your moment of sadness, you're doing this, I know. You wanted me to let everyone know that should they ever have a loved one with a traumatic brain injury, it doesn't have to be an ending. There will be limits, but if you can work with professionals, like how Ken worked with the team that he had, there is still much that can be done. You just have to learn to live within what you have. It was so hard because his body wouldn't let him do things that his mind, which was still so sharp, wanted him to do. You, Ina, you learned this Torah the hard way. Our hearts are with you and the whole family. And that you're open to share with those who need it is a true tribute to you. You've always been Ken's loving and laughing partner, ready to share. I know we all of us stand ready to share our hugs, love, and presence with you and the family at this very tender time. Ken will be deeply missed by his many friends and associates. He loved his temple. He loved his rabbis, something that was felt profoundly by Rabbi Gutman, by me, by Rabbi Fisher, and now by Rabbi Hertz. We will all miss him dearly. And so will this community that he loved so much and gave so much to. And our hearts are especially with Ina today, his wife of 61 years, his children, Jay and Lee together with Justin, his grandchildren, Rachel together with James, Sam and Lilly, his brother Barry together with Lynn, his sister-in-law Kay together with Bruce, and his extended family, including nieces and nephews. The loss of Ken was not unexpected. What'd you say, Ina? He's having a conversation with God, and they sure are taking their sweet old time. But those heavenly gates of righteousness were open, and smiling, Ken walked towards them. And he was greeted by his old pal, Joel Barkleham, who you told me was surely waiting there for him with a drink. And that's not hard to see. It's also not hard to envision God there too. God in full glory, welcoming Otis from Reedsville, welcoming him to his deserved place of righteousness on high, just as Yom Kippur was about to start. What a great life. What a great man. Tzedek with a smile. And you said you hope that the next kid that is born, has a life as blessed as his was. What a great blessing. Zichrono livracha, may Ken Eisenberg's memory continue to inspire us and live on in everlasting goodness. Together, let's all say, Amen. Please rise now for the traditional El Malei Rachamim prayer.
May Ken's memory endure among us as a blessing, raising that cookout milkshake to him. In your own time, O God, when we too are called to enter eternity, may we leave this life secure in the faith that in your light we shall see light. In life and in death, We cannot go where you are not, and where you are, hope endures. Sustained by this assurance, we invoke your name, Almighty God, with the words of El Malei Rachamim. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein Bameromim, Hamitzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei HaShechina, Im Kedoshim Utehorim, Kezor Harakia Mazhirim, At Nishmat, Otis Motel Zachariah, Ben Shmuel ve'Esther, Shalach le'olamo, Bal harachamim yastirehu, Beseter kenafav le'olamim, Ve'yitzror b'yitzror chayim et nishmato, Adonai hu nachalato, Ve'yanuach b'shalom al mishkavo, V'nomar Amen. O compassionate God, eternal Spirit of the universe, grant perfect rest in your sheltering presence to Kenneth Otis Lee Eisenberg, who has entered eternity. O God of mercy, may Ken find refuge in your eternal presence, and let his soul be bound up in the bond of everlasting life. May God be his inheritance. May he rest in peace. And together let us say,
Amen. Interment will take place at the Greensboro Hebrew Cemetery 30 minutes from now, which is at roughly 11:30. Note, we are not going to be driving in a processional. Just go directly to the Hebrew Cemetery. It is too challenging, even dangerous, to put the headlights and the blinkers on and do all that. Please allow the family to get to the transport vehicle, to their cars, and do not visit with the family in our foyer area or in the entry area in the sanctuary doors. The Greensboro Hebrew Cemetery, I think many of us know, is on the corner of Van Story and High Point Road. You can get there by directing your GPS to the Greensboro Hebrew Cemetery. Make sure you put Greensboro in, otherwise you'll wind up out in High Point. That would be funny for Ken. And if you would like to be an additional source of comfort or to visit with the family, there will be a Shiva service in our chapel here at Temple Emmanuel tonight at 5:45 in the afternoon, and again tomorrow at the Eisenberg home at 5:45. At this time, I would like to ask for the pallbearers to please come forward and take your places.